episode of These Go to 11. Let's turn it up. Hey everybody, welcome back to These Go to 11, an unchurchy conversation about everyday faith. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and review on your favorite podcast platform. This not only helps us to get our content out there, but also helps us to find out what you, our faithful listeners, think. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to These Go to 11. Once again, I'm Nathan Bell. Joining me as always, Greg Dutcher. Greg, what's going on, man?
I'll tell you what's going on, Nathan. I want to know, I'm going to put you on the spot right now. What was it like the hour before we went into the studio when you were outside of my office and heard me talking to my creative writing mentor about my nerdy time travel story? Dude,
it was life-changing.
Nathan, you're a good liar, dude. You are a good liar. I'm thinking, all right, quick background. I won't bore everybody to tears with it. The cool thing about this writing program that I'm doing at Wilkes University is, it's low residency.
Yep.
As you know, Nathan, I'm gone week in January, week in June.
Yep.
And then everything else in between is online.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're at the stage now. We work with mentors, and the cool thing is you explore all kinds of genre writing in this program. The foundations level. Poetry. I don't have an ear or an eye or typing fingers or pen finger for poetry.
Sure.
I appreciate it.
Shakespeare, you are not.
I am no Shakespeare, dude. Not even close. The plays I can get into once I get past the antiquated language. The sonnet, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? No. No, you shall not, William, because I don't want to read the next bit of verbiage in this poem. That's me. I'm a simpleton. But the other areas, nonfiction, which I've had the most experience in, fiction, which I read a lot of, and then playwriting, which is kind of intriguing. I've seen a few plays, and then screenplay, which is where I'm doing some work in right now. So that's the quick background. It wasn't as quick as I wanted it to be. And poor Nathan, I just want our audience to know, I have this little time travel story. And it's, when you do time travel, you have to come up with your rules and your consistency. So just on the home front, on a good night, I can get maybe Lisa's interest for 15 minutes, maybe it's 12, where she'll hang with me when you're paying what I'm paying for the program and everything, and you have a mentor, and she's helping you. Alice, she's really smart. She actually wrote on the TV show Billions.
Yep.
So she knows her stuff and knows a lot more than I do. And she's giving me advice, and I'm thinking, you're out there hearing, well, right. One thing on the space-time continuum, when Christopher sees Peter 40 years later, 2 months before he goes back to commit the murder, and basically you hear, wah, wah, nerd alert, and the fact that you're just patiently bearing overhearing that when you're trying to grade papers and work on your school stuff, dude, is very encouraging.
Well, let's be real. That's Joy who's trying to grade papers. I don't do that.
Yeah, right. You're like, yes, Nathan's lovely wife Joy is out there working hard. Nathan is
playing Candy Crush.
Yeah. Dude, your honesty compels me, intrigues me, and warms my soul. So, yes, it was Nerd Fest Central out here today, dude. I mean, sometimes there's this, like, I almost have an out-of-body experience, and I see myself talking and realize what a dork. Like, I feel dork should be stamped on my forehead during those conversations. So, and maybe at other times, too. But
yeah, but in fairness, you and I have sat down and had those, long conversations as well.
Dude.
So
we have. I mean, you and I mean, we've done podcasts on Stranger Things with Ben, and we had Isaac talking about all the movies.
Yeah.
And you and I have, had Nathan Bartlebaugh.
Yep.
We geek out on all kinds of stuff. So I love that we can freewheel sometimes. I know today, a little more on the serious side, which is awesome in light of our theme, but We love doing it all here.
We do. And yeah, as you said, we're, coming into a more serious theme. We had made a decision that, in light of what we had done at Christmas, again, Greg, you try to do something, every other year with putting out a resource or material for the church and how they're reading things and prepping them for the season.
Yes.
So at Christmas devotional or Christmas devotionals, in the form of an audio or video presentation or a book, something to help us start thinking and contemplating. But that's not happening this year.
Yep.
And so what we decided to do was use the podcast as an opportunity to do that instead. And so we did it at Christmas, and we're going to do it again for Easter. And we're going to start similarly to the way we did at Christmas, where we're going to start in the Old Testament.
Yes. But wait a minute, brother. Easter is all celebrated and described in the New Testament. You're saying something radical, as if the two testaments may be connected.
I know it's radical. I know it's hard to believe, but we ask you to suspend reality and put your imagination caps on, and think that God has, in His divine providence, put the two together as one solid narrative. I know that's going to be hard, and I know that's radical.
We don't want to be too radical.
That's right.
We don't want to go on a limb and assume things, all these crazy things, that there's a master plan and God's providence. Oh, wait, no, we do. And I think this has been attributed to Augustine, dude, and I'm never sure that this is true. The sentiment is true.
Yeah.
And that sentiment, or that statement, that axiom, is the new is in the old concealed.
Yeah.
And the old is in the new revealed.
Yes.
I love that. I heard that 20 or more years ago, and it's just a helpful summary of the connectedness between the two testaments. They really are, for instance, the book of Hebrews.
Yes.
If you're doing a really deep dive study on the New Testament book of Hebrews, you're going to need some familiarity with the book of Leviticus, the Old Testament sacrificial code, the Old Testament priesthood, the Old Testament temple, and the structure of the temple, because Hebrews is a deceptively simple book. You look at it, I can go through this. There's a lot about Jesus, New Testament, but then you start, what, new Melchizedek? What?
Right.
The order of Melchizedek? Who's Melchizedek? And it just, I love it, though, because it gives me hope when I'm in those hard sections of the Old Testament that we've talked about before. And, there's some tough sledding. Just knowing, hey, in the ultimate sense, everything happening here matters.
Right.
It is somehow going to lead in, prepare, set the stage for, fill in the blank, but these incredible New Testament moments. So I love that we're going to do this. And again, shout out to my buddy Tom Keene. Tom is super kind to me always about last year, Nathan, year before this past season, when I did the daily Christmas video devotions and released the book All for Love, which was a 40-day Easter devotional. He has always been kind that those were helpful. So remember, at Christmas, I said, Tom, this is for you.
That's right.
So Tom, a few months later, this is for you.
That's right.
And anybody else that might benefit.
Yeah.
We'll do longer devotions, as it were.
Yes.
But we're going to kind of talk our way through some important sections.
Yeah, and the nice thing about the section that we will be in today specifically is that, you mentioned Hebrews and Leviticus can be very tough sledding. Where we're going to find ourselves today is not typically considered tough sledding.
No.
And in fact, Hollywood has grasped onto this section many times and has made much media over this because it is such a fantastic story, whether or not they understand and realize what's truly going on in this section, it when done right, it makes for beautiful storytelling.
Yes.
And that is Exodus. Made popular by the Ten Commandments with Charlton Heston.
Yep.
Made less popular and horrible by that Ridley Scott atrocity.
Yeah.
Gods and Generals or something, whatever it was.
Well, Gods and Generals.
That was the Civil War.
But I know what was it? I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I can't remember. Yeah, I can't remember the name of it, but Christian Bale was in it. It was travesty.
Yeah.
The best adaptation, ironically, I think, is The Prince of Egypt.
DreamWorks, baby.
And I can remember when that came out in theaters.
I do too.
And just being blown away. It does not capture all of the details, but it captures the heart and essence of what's going on here and shows the story very well.
It really did. It really did. In fact, I'm going to riff on that a little later, Nathan. If I forget, remind me, because it's very good. And the nice thing about an animated picture is, didn't they use Jell-O? I'm told in the Ten Commandments.
In the Ten Commandments, to slowly show the parting.
And it's pretty good for when it was made. I mean, it's half a century or more ago now. And they, they kind of went almost like stop motion, frame by frame, move it milliliter, move it a milliliter to show it divide. And the nice thing about, you do something under an animated banner, and you can really do some stuff. I remember when they're walking through the dry ground, you see the lightning flash, and you can see the outline of like the whale. It was awesome. I mean, it was really, really well done. And there were some things that, you're right, some of the details weren't there. Some of them were there in ways I didn't expect.
Yes.
Their handling of the plagues.
Yep.
And actually, dude, let's talk about the plagues.
Yeah.
In the book of Exodus. When we think of Exodus, we think of exiting.
Yeah.
Right? So in its most literal form, it would be when they left Egypt. So we back up a little bit. You got to go back several centuries. And, you've got the Israelites being in Egypt as a good thing initially, because Joseph, who is the second in command under a much better Pharaoh than the Pharaoh we meet centuries later in the book of Exodus. Joseph has a dream from God. There's going to be a famine. He has it years earlier, so he convinces Pharaoh, we've got to store grain. We've got to be ready for a big hit that is going to affect the ancient world, and they're the only real place prepared when the famine hits. And of course, Jacob and his sons come down to Egypt, looking for safe haven, and there's so much that happens there. But it's a really, really powerful story. Because Joseph forgives his brothers who had thrown him into a pit, sold off by these slave traders, basically, and taken to Egypt. And I remember an old sermon on this, from the pit to the prison to the palace. There's good alliteration.
There you go.
That captures Joseph's story, right? He does that, and he rises up in this place. So the book of Genesis ends with Jacob's sons, their families, the patriarchs, as it were, of Israel in Egypt as a means of provision and protection. And then, good podcaster would have had this ready, dude. But who's ever accused me of being a good podcaster?
We're authentic here.
Exactly. But if you notice how it starts, these are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob. So we go right back to the story, and you've got Reuben, Simeon, etc. You've got what will become the 12 tribes. All the descendants of Jacob were 70 persons. Joseph was already in Egypt. Then Joseph died and all his brothers in that generation. But the people of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly. So we've already got a fulfillment of God's promise to Abraham. That his descendants would be numerous. They multiplied, they grew exceedingly strong, so that the land was filled with them. Yes, God's promise on display. Verse 8, immediately, now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. That tells you everything. This is a different king, different Pharaoh. And he said to his people, behold, the people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply, and if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land. So centuries later, this new Pharaoh does not want Israel to topple Egypt, sees them as a threat. And we've got an increasing policy of hostility toward the Israelites, right?
And just so people understand, I mean, we're talking the span of 400 years, correct? Between the death of Joseph, essentially, and when this new Pharaoh arises. So this is an extremely long span of time that passes. It's not like, great grandson of Pharaoh comes along. And
and you can tell, even though the passage isn't the fact that look how much they've expanded. They went from 70 to basically a nation within a nation. So this took centuries to happen. And it is about 400 years that they're there. So Moses, I won't tell his whole story, but of course Moses in the extermination campaign to weed out these male children born in Israelite homes, Moses's mother is going to be very, very cautious and very careful, and kind of in just great hope. Puts the baby, pitches the boat, keeps it waterproofed, or the boat, the little basket, I should say, and sends him out on the river. So you can actually say Moses was down by the river.
Right.
Can I say that there?
As long as he wasn't in a van.
Not a van, a basket on the river. Can I invoke the great Chris Farley or Matt Foley? So, of course, we've got Exodus telling us about his story. The irony is he is taken into Pharaoh's household. The women of Pharaoh's household provide for this helpless little baby that they see. So in God's providence, I'm just fascinated by this. Moses is raised in the household of the Pharaoh who wants to exterminate the Israelites. Just, again, we don't want to be radical.
That's right.
But it's almost like there's a hand of providence at work here, right?
Well, and there's a parallel too to that, right? I mean, and that's kind of what we're going to be talking about as we introduce this Christmas theme or this Easter theme, and we talked about, the Herod's horrible decree. Well, go all the way back into Exodus and we see a decree very similar going on. Where, children, of a certain age are to be put to death so that they can be stopped, so that this, Israel growing can just be stopped. And it's interesting and fascinating too, right, that this is all taking place in Egypt, and the place where Christ will escape to is Egypt. And so there's just so much going on here that as you read, particularly the stories of the Old Testament and the New Testament, as we spoke of earlier, what God is doing in setting the stage for all of these things.
Right. Absolutely, dude. The parallels is by the end of this month, I'm hoping, if we've done our job well enough, right, we should remind each other, remind those of you listening of just the beautiful, intricate master plan, and how everything that we see unfolding in the gospel narratives
Yeah.
for what we think of as Good Friday, Jesus' arrest and his wrestling before his arrest in the Garden of Gethsemane, his trials, his death on the cross, ultimately his triumph and resurrection. How much, one, we see table setting,
Yeah.
but also some prefiguring.
Yeah.
The story is told in some very parallel cyclical ways.
Yeah.
So that we're reminded, really, what's one of the songs we sing here, Nathan? Oh, come on. Same God. I was blanking on it. That's the whole point, right? You are the same God.
Yeah.
Right? Just to remind us that God was not a different God in the Old Testament. He wasn't growing and developing, and he's more sophisticated and nuanced in the New Testament. He didn't have a mid-eternity crisis and ride a Harley or something. He's the same God who is at work here. And initially, what I'm fascinated about with the story of Moses is God designates one leader.
Yeah.
And he's predominantly going to work for the benefit of the many through the one. Just that alone is significant.
Yeah.
Right? And I think to see the care that he has in Moses' birth, and as you just pointed out, the protection that he has in divine providence from a death decree for these children is amazing.
Yeah.
And of course, Moses is raised in Pharaoh's household. The Exodus tells it quickly. He goes out one day, he sees the oppressive burdens that his people are under, and he gets into a fight. In fact, I was just looking at that. The way it is rendered here in Exodus chapter 2. Why is my... of course, Nathan, now it's freezing. My whole screen is freezing, so let me just go back, open it up again. Yeah, my screen literally froze. So I'll tell you, I'm a professional. Exodus chapter 2. Now, man, I'm sorry, that's the birth of Moses. My apologies. Verse 11, one day when Moses had grown up, he went out to his people, looked on their burdens, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his people. He looked this way and that, seeing no one, he struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. When he went out the next day, behold, two Hebrews were struggling together. And he said to the man in the wrong, why do you strike your companion? And he answered, who made you a prince and judge over us? Do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? Moses was afraid and thought, surely this thing is known. When Pharaoh heard of it, he sought to kill Moses. But Moses fled from Pharaoh and stayed in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Tells it so quickly. Yeah, we've got Moses' birth, couple of sentences that he grew up in Pharaoh's household. Then he gets in a fight with an Egyptian, kills him. And then his fellow Hebrews, which is interesting, call him out. Which means the word is on the street. Hey, dude, this is no secret.
Right.
And when Pharaoh hears of it, he says, And think about it. This is the very thing Pharaoh feared.
Right.
And now that's one thing, dude, in the Heston version that I take issue with.
Yeah.
If I remember rightly, the way they portray it is Charleston Heston's Moses discovers one day that he's Jewish.
Yes.
And we actually know from the text when Pharaoh's daughter takes him out of the water, they know he's one of the Hebrew children.
Yes.
But they take pity on him.
Yes.
So it's almost, you don't get the interior psychology, but you wonder if Pharaoh's like, well...
The Prince of Egypt does a very similar thing where he discovers his heritage.
Yes.
It seems to be that his mother knows exactly who he is, or his adoptive mother knows.
Yes.
But he doesn't.
Right. I'm reading Exodus like he does.
Yeah.
Because he goes out and checks on his people and sees how they're mistreated.
Yeah.
And you don't have this aha moment. No, it's dramatic. I get it. There's some literary fascination when the person discovers, Superman. I've got these powers.
Right.
I'm learning these things, etc. But again, it's a minor quibble. I understand what they're doing. There is the aha moment is always a powerful moment in a story, the self-discovery moment.
Sure.
Can you tell I'm doing this screenplay thing?
That's right.
Geeking out. And then there's the Act 1 inciting incident. Anyway, but all this setup.
Yeah.
And then Moses, what you get the impression of is Moses lives out his adult life till he's 80 with that whole experience in his rear view.
Yeah.
Hey, man, had a strange beginning, but now he's far away from Egypt, married, living his life, not going to worry about it anymore, and then God appears in the burning bush. This all happens pretty quickly in Exodus. Exodus 3, and he reveals to him, I am that I am. I've got a mission for you. Moses is fearful, etc. So that's all the setup to get to the plagues. When Moses shows back up in Israel, and this we would believe is a different Pharaoh, probably the son of the former one. I'm not going to try to take a guess. That's a seminary question, which Pharaoh this might be. Part of it, dude, there is a debate on the timing of the Exodus.
Right.
If you're a early Exodus person, it could be 1440 to 1400. If you're a late Exodus person, which I don't think makes you orthodox or unorthodox.
Sure.
It's just a discussion or debate. It could be as late as 1290 BC, which is pretty significant. You've got more than a century, almost a century and a half there. So what we know, and it's funny, the Pharaoh is not named.
Right.
It's Pharaoh, but he goes back to Egypt as a grown man, an older man, and of course, God uses him as his mouthpiece. And he appears in the court of Pharaoh and says, Yahweh has commanded to let my people go. And Pharaoh says, of course.
Not.
No, he does not.
Real quick, just to back up again, looking at, the parallels, the similarities, right? Moses flees for his life, and I find this fascinating, into the wilderness.
Yes.
Where Christ willingly goes into the wilderness. Right?
Yes.
Moses is going to unwillingly go and receive his training at that point, where Christ is going to willingly go and receive his training.
Yeah, that's a great observation, dude. There are, continuity and discontinuity.
Right.
Similarity and differences. But the wilderness, boy, do we see that come up a lot. Where God does his work. In the desolate place, in the barren place, the far away place which we often go to either to give up, we often go to get away, to retire, to just put it behind us. I don't want to think about it anymore, and we're called back. And think about how much these themes come up in major stories. How many times do you see? I mean, outside of the Bible, outside of any theological religious literature, and of course now watch me not be able to think of one, but how many stories do you see where a character has kind of hung up his cleats and said, I'm done, but something calls them back?
Well, Rocky's done it at least 7 or 8 times.
I was going to say, Matt, that's for you, brother. Matt Smith, that is for you. How many times has Rocky moved on? It's behind him, but something calls him back, right? Something speaks to him in the desolate place, in his place. It's millions and millions of dollars in mansions, but still.
With a robot.
Although, in his carefully edited Rocky IV, he takes the robot out. But I'm always fascinated by that. That comes right out of here. You've got the person that is away, and God says, I'm not done with you. So just these beautiful pictures of his sovereignty, right? That we make our plans, and it's almost, you can envision God say, oh, that's cute.
Right.
That's cute. They think they can kind of do what they want to do.
You've mentioned it before, right? It's like a little child, like playing real life things, the little child playing house, the little child playing school, and as a parent, you're like, oh, that's so sweet, knowing that that's not reality.
Of course, and you think of God's patience and his tenderness, and here's Moses, and he's got every reason in the world not to go back, and he's apparently, I think the Hebrew is, we say slow of speech is what most English translations say. Believe it's rough tongue. Somebody can double check me on that. I'm virtually certain I'm a man of rough tongue, some sort of impediment.
Yeah.
He's not a speaker. Well, we're going to have your brother Aaron do that for you. He's going to stand by you and help you on that front. But Moses is still going to go. And then we've got the plagues, dude. And what's fascinating about the plagues is that each one seems to target a specific aspect of Egyptian religious belief.
Yeah.
Right? Demonstrating that what? God is superior over the gods of Egypt.
Yes.
If you think about it, just a couple of ones that come up, basically, the Egyptians worship the Nile River.
Yes.
If it was its own personal deity.
Right.
So God turns it to blood.
Right.
The Egyptians worship the sun.
Yeah.
God causes an eclipse to fall over. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The plagues.
It's in direct defiance of their gods.
Yes. We really see Yahweh versus the gods of Egypt.
Yeah.
And God always wins.
Yeah.
The first 3 or 4 plagues, I believe, are sort of universal. But then something starts happening with the plagues that's fascinating. Distinction. And this is the setup for the Passover.
Yeah.
You've got the plagues affecting those in Egypt, but not the Israelite encampment.
Yeah.
Right? Which is starting to show Pharaoh what? Oh, I think God means to protect his people.
Yeah.
And there is great peril to me.
Yeah.
That's what he should conclude.
Right.
If I don't. And when you think, dude, if you go all the way back to Genesis 12, and bring that up really quickly, and the promise God gave to Abraham, we really see this playing out. You know, the Lord called to Abram. He's Abram there, which means something like exalted father. Then Abraham is father of many.
Yep.
Go from your country, your kindred, your father's house. I want you to go to a land I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you, I will curse.
Yeah.
And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed.
Yeah.
I think it was Calvin that said this, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but the book of Exodus can really just be understood like this, and particularly the first part, the first 15 chapters or so. I'll say Genesis into Exodus. God made a promise to Israel.
Yeah.
Pharaoh stands up and clenches his fist in the face of God.
Yeah.
And says, no. And then God rises up to defend his promise.
Yeah.
That's really it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, yes, there's a lot more that happens on the playing field.
Right.
Moses and the actual iterations of the plagues and how they play out. But ultimately behind it all, it's God rising up to defend his covenant promise.
Yeah.
Isn't that beautiful?
Well, and we see that lesson and that theme continue when Joshua takes over, right? The night before he goes to enter the promised land, you know, this mysterious figure, the angel of the Lord, appears to him.
Commander of the Lord's armies.
And, Joshua rises up with his sword, are you for us or for our enemies?
Yeah.
And that's the wrong question.
No. It says neither.
Yeah.
Right? Which is that there's a bigger thing happening there. That's a great point. It's kind of, is it our cause or their cause? Well, God has a cause.
Yeah.
He has a story that he's writing. And the story is ultimately going to be for the benefit of the world.
Yes.
But in this moment,
yep,
the vehicle, the agent is going to be the nation of Israel.
Yeah.
And now you've got Pharaoh trying to defy the God of Israel. Mm-hmm. And that's done. Dude, I did this years ago too. Matt Smith might remember this. There was a guy, Matt, if you're listening to this, Dave from your old Presbyterian church a million years ago, who was a really good Bible teacher for us. We were young Christian guys, and he was just one of the first kind of older, mature guys we met, just a lay leader in that church, loved the scripture. And I remember him saying, I must have been 17 or 18, and I was just beginning to learn the Bible. And I was asking him the question about, what I was reading in Exodus, and sometimes it says Pharaoh hardened his own heart, and sometimes it says God hardened his heart. What is it? And I remember Dave laughing, and I said, what? And he said, man, Greg, I sat down, and I said, I'm going to figure this out. I charted this out. Every use. Okay, I'm going to see if there's a pattern here.
Right.
God responds. Well, maybe sometimes God goes first, but it gives why does Pharaoh harden his own heart, and why does God harden it? And I remember he said, I spent hours on it, and I got nothing.
Yeah.
I couldn't discern it. So, dude, I never forgot that.
Yeah.
So when I was in seminary, taking a course ironically called Exodus to Exile, and we had to write a paper on the hardening of Pharaoh's heart.
Yeah.
So I sat down. The first thing I said, I remember this guy, Dave from Hamilton Presbyterian Church, saying this. I sat down, I did the same thing, and I drew up a chart. Dude, I kid you not. Exact same experience.
Yeah.
I've read a few theories. I get nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, just for people that might ask, God does harden hearts.
Right.
I mean, it says that. I can't change what the text says. It's also fascinating that Pharaoh hardens his own heart.
Right.
And it does appear, I think pretty clearly to us, that Pharaoh is not I wish God weren't making me do this.
Right.
That Pharaoh is fully mind, body, and soul invested in his mission.
He is dug in his heels.
Yes. So then sometimes I land on the simple part, right?
Yeah.
God is sovereign. I also know Pharaoh was fully invested in this as his own decision.
Yeah.
And we can let that mystery lie. But all this, we won't go through all 10 plagues, but the 10th and final plague is the death of the firstborn son. Which, if you remember, Nathan, in The Prince of Egypt, I was pretty impressed.
Yes.
They did not dodge that.
No. And it, as you said, they didn't dodge it, and the whole thing surrounding it, because we say the death of the firstborn son, but this is where we really start getting into and understanding the Passover. And what's fascinating is if you think about it, in some small way, we still celebrate the Passover to this day through communion.
Yes.
That what was started then has continued. Now it's changed forms, and its true symbolism has been revealed to us in Christ. But every time we take communion, we are hearkening back to that time period.
Yes. Oh, absolutely, dude. And Jesus offers that first communion in the context of a Passover meal.
Yes.
Essentially, it's a really powerful connection.
Yeah.
And I know we're trying to be careful and not spill too much into the New Testament.
Yeah.
But I'm sure many of you know it's interesting when Jesus says this cup is the new covenant. Well, what's the first? Well, we this is what we're talking about right here. So I pulled up some old notes here, dude, for the Passover meal. God is going to get his people out of Egypt.
Yes.
That's ultimately what he's going to do.
Yeah.
And he's going to lead them to the land that he promised Abraham.
Yep.
Go to a land that I will show you. Interestingly enough, dude, the only land that Abraham and Sarah own in the promised land upon their death are where they're buried.
Yeah.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
That's all they saw in their lifetime. But God did not forget what he was going to do. So, of course, the Passover meal commemorates the sort of last act that God's going to do to get Israel out of Egypt into that land that they promised. So, the central symbol of that meal is the lamb, the Passover lamb, which would recall the idea of the lamb being sacrificed. And in the blood of that lamb is used to mark the doorway of the home, so that when the angel of the Lord, who is a minister of death, it's a really chilling section, is going to pass over the land. Now, Now, this is what fascinates me. That blood is to mark the Israelites so that they would forever tell their children
Yep.
what happened on that night. Why is this night different than other nights?
Yeah.
What is it that happened? And they would tell that story. And the story is simple but chilling in some ways. The angel of the Lord was going through the land of Egypt, and every firstborn male,
Yeah.
including Pharaoh's household,
Yep.
was struck down,
Yeah.
died, but not in Israel. What's interesting about the blood that is applied from the lamb is that we've already mentioned God did not need that.
Right.
If you interpret it too primitively, oh, the angel's going to need to see the blood or he's not going to know.
Right.
Well, we've already seen some of the other plagues
Yes.
were distinct,
Yes.
right? They were happening to Israel, but they weren't. They were happening to the Egyptians, but they weren't happening to the Israelites.
Yes.
Here, I think the blood is more for them to understand.
Yeah.
A sacrifice was made.
Yeah.
And now when the angel of the Lord sees that blood, he passes over
Yes.
and does not come in and bring judgment.
Yeah. Well, and as you said, right, the plagues start off universal, and then they structure down to Egypt, and then we see this one becoming universal again.
Yes.
There's a condition, and like you said, it's not the condition of God needs to see it. It's the condition of you need to see it, and you need to be reminded of who God is. And again, God is showing them their need for obedience.
Yes.
The obedience to God is not optional, right? We've seen that with Pharaoh digging in his heels and refusing to let him go. And God just says, okay, then we're going to do this, by our understanding and our standard, the hard way, right?
Yes.
It's not hard for God, but it's certainly going to be hard on Egypt, and it's going to be hard on Pharaoh.
Yes.
And it's fascinating that last one becomes a universal one again.
Yes.
That obedience to God is required.
Absolutely.
Or else your family will see death.
Yes. And I'm so glad, dude. It's probably a good time to mention that our Wednesday night group at the church is going to be doing. And dude, I don't have the date on me.
It's the 27th.
Oh, thank you, brother.
March 27th.
March the 27th is going to be doing a Passover Seder meal.
Yep.
Which it's always good. Have you done those? I'm sure you've. I've done a couple.
Yeah, I've done a couple of them.
Yeah, and it's just nice to get kind of a play-by-play
Yeah.
of, okay, this is what this means, this is what that means. The general picture is that the meal is eaten in haste.
Yes.
Because they're gonna bolt.
Right.
They are heading out.
Yeah.
That was the last plague in Egypt, and Pharaoh is still, even though his child
Yeah.
has died,
Yeah.
he will not soften his heart.
Yeah.
He will not say, my word, do I need any more proof?
Right.
Israel's untouched, and every household in the house of Egypt has suffered this great loss. Again, I just looked up. I'm looking here. It appears that the plagues that did not affect the Israelites, well, the water turned to blood, while all the water sources in Egypt were turned to blood. The Israelites in the land of Goshen had access to clean water. It's Exodus 7:21. The frogs, the plague of frogs affected all of Egypt, but not the land of Goshen, where the Israelites lived. That was their encampment. The gnats, that's Exodus 8:22, and the gnats or lice. This is a little more inferred. It's commonly interpreted that it did not afflict them, as it's not explicitly stated. Otherwise, that would be Exodus 8:16 and 18.
Yeah.
So clearly, the blood on the doorpost was not necessary. I always like to stress that.
Yeah.
It wasn't, because I understand children here, like, it's like if you're you're playing a youth football game in your shirts and skins.
Right.
Well, you need to know who the shirts are to know who to throw it to.
Right.
You don't want to throw it to a skin because, they're the other team and they'll run it back for the touchdown.
Yeah.
The angel of the Lord is not in that predicament.
Right.
Obviously God has got this directed, but just that this meal would commemorate this event.
Yeah.
And the other thing that we should not move too quickly past, Nathan, is whatever it is, the cost of Israel being rescued
Yes.
is the death of the firstborn son.
Yeah.
That's significant.
Yeah.
We have a lamb that's slaughtered,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Which will signal their safety
Yes.
in the blood applied.
Yep.
We have the sons of these that die,
Yeah.
pay the price, which is a terrible, terrible
Yeah.
thought. And I know that doesn't always sit well with people.
Right.
And this has to be understood as a judgment on Pharaoh
Right.
that tragically extended to the people that he should have protected.
Yeah.
But his hard heart would not allow him to do so.
Yeah. Well, and God tells us very clearly in Scripture that vengeance belongs to him and him alone, because these matters of life and death, for us to take into our hands, we can't know and understand and see all things, right? We react out of a knee-jerk response to things. God never does that.
Right.
Right? We see God telling Israel, that he is slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love, that, what Egypt has decided to do to the nation of Israel, what Pharaoh has decided to do in terms of clenching his fist and shaking it at God, God will not be mocked. He makes that clear.
No.
That he will bring about justice, and he will bring about vengeance.
Yes. Which is, of course, ultimately seen when it's a very suspenseful narrative.
Yeah.
When they are making their way to the Red Sea or the Sea of Reeds. We can let the scholars debate that. But they make their way to the water's edge.
Yeah.
And what a picture. I just referenced in the sermon, last week, Dunkirk, the movie
Yes.
Dunkirk.
Yeah.
Right? It's a much more modern version, but you've got people that are backed up against the sea.
Yeah.
There's nowhere to go.
Yeah.
And Pharaoh and his armies, they're coming in on their mighty chariots, the most powerful empire in the world at that time, with an arsenal of unmatched power, bearing down on Israel. And again, what is that? It's the last clenched fist.
Yeah.
No.
Right.
You're not going to fulfill your promise. That's what Pharaoh's doing in the redemptive story.
Yeah.
In the human story, it's revenge, it's bitterness, these thorns in my side, I'm going to destroy them. And what an incredible moment, as God instructs Moses to put down his staff.
Yeah.
And the water divides.
Yeah.
It's just what an incredible thought. And it's funny, usually in the movies, although I think in Prince of Egypt it might have been a little longer. Most scholars I've read said it probably took several hours to pass through.
Yeah.
It makes it look like it's 30 seconds in the Ten Commandments, right?
Yeah,
And it's probably a bit longer. We don't know exactly how long, but, they walk on dry land.
Right. And that is something that none of the depictions get, is that, when Scripture says dry land.
Yes.
It's not muddy. It's not slippery.
No, that's the miracle.
Yeah.
It's a smooth pathway. It's like you're walking. You're in Lancaster on a beautiful day, right? And their sandals aren't getting stuck in the mud. Oh, it's so wet here. It is. If he can split the sea,
right,
the way you'd roll down the red carpet, right, on Oscar night, and let those stars come down, and with complete, reckless abandon, and they're not impeded by anyone. This is what he does for his children.
Yeah.
And they go over, and again, the themes of protection and provision, and distinction, from the Egyptians finally come to their full expression here.
Yeah.
Because they go through, and again, I think this is where the movies, I can't remember the Ten Commandments. I think in The Prince of Egypt, you've got Pharaoh living.
Yes.
It does not appear that would have likely happened.
Yeah.
I think the implication is they all drowned.
Yeah.
I think he's on a big rock.
Like a wave kind of washes him back onto the shore.
It's to show his anger
Right.
and his kind of last, how dare you defeat me. But they get through.
Yeah.
And I wonder, were the Israelites, were the Egyptians thinking? I've often wondered that. Well, I guess it'll stay through for us.
Right.
They should have known, in light of what God has been doing.
Right.
It probably was not going to work out so well.
Yeah.
And it does not.
Yeah.
So that's the event.
Yeah.
Right, dude? And the rest of the book of Exodus,
Yeah.
people start losing some hope because it's architectural.
Right.
It's largely page after page after page of, but we didn't cover this, dude, of what the tabernacle should be, how it should be constructed.
Yeah.
But one might ask, well, how can they construct a tabernacle with these ornate gold overlays and what? Well,
Right.
we have an answer to that because they were instructed to plunder the Egyptians on their way out of Egypt.
Yep.
God says their gold, are going to be yours.
Yeah.
And when Moses calls for the construction of the tabernacle, place that they will worship, it's their mobile church.
Yep.
Right? It's their church on the move as they wander, and they're going to wander a lot longer than they expected. They've got a place to worship. They bring out all their wealth, and they have to turn it away.
Yeah.
They have too much.
Yeah.
It's a picture of abundance and provision again.
Yeah.
I will say what I love at the end of the book of Exodus, though, is marvelous.
Yeah.
And let me go there. If you can stick out those hard architectural details, and they are really tough.
Yeah.
And go to the last chapter in Exodus, chapter 40. You've got the tabernacle is erected, and then you've got then the cloud covered the tent of meeting.
Yeah.
And the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. And Moses was not able to enter the tent of meeting because the cloud settled on it. And the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Throughout all their journeys, whenever the cloud was taken up from over the tabernacle, the people of Israel would set out. It's just it's the complete picture.
Right.
God is with his people.
Yeah.
Being worshipped. His presence is with them.
Yeah.
They are his people. I've skipped over Exodus 19 and 20, which is another key moment when he enters into the covenant with them at Mount Sinai, gives the 10 Commandments through Moses, etc. But it's hard to summarize Exodus in a podcast.
Yeah. Well, and just to because I know we're not hitting the New Testament a lot, but we do want to bridge the gap, right?
Yeah.
And just going back where the sea is parted, right? What a picture of you're on the brink of death.
Yes.
That's what's coming, right? Is the Egyptians are coming at them full force with everything that they have left.
Yes.
And God makes a way from death to life.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating is it's one way.
Yeah.
You have one road that you're going to be able to stay on because anywhere else and you're going to die.
Yeah.
And just, again, such a picture of what God is doing and what he's showing his people and trying to get them to see and understand.
Yeah.
And going back to what we said about, God is the one who, vengeance is mine, understanding that he ultimately is sacrificing his only son.
Yes.
That his son all of his vengeance will come down on his son for our sake.
Yes.
All of his wrath will come down on his son for our sake. And that can't be forgotten. That those who would, shake their fists in defiance against God makes a way.
Yes.
God makes a way of escape, and that is in the form of his son. And that can't be forgotten. I mean, that's what this season is about.
Yeah.
Yes, Christmas is that too, because ultimately the reason why he comes is to die, but we have different categories for Christmas where this is, we are intentionally focusing on his death and what that means and represents for us.
Yes. And when you think of what fascinates me, Nathan, is all this rich detail, all these events, which we'll talk next week, how the other places in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
If you look back, it's not hard to prove the key Old Testament event is the Exodus.
Yes.
Creation is huge.
Yeah.
Huge event. The key Old Testament, the redemptive event is the Exodus. And we'll look at some passages next week. I've already got a few of them noted down here in my notes for the Psalms.
Yep.
That look back, the prophets.
Yes.
Call back to the Exodus. So we're told, even in the Old Testament, remember this event.
Yes.
The series of events when God rescued his people.
Yes.
And what it took to effect that rescue.
Yes.
So that we can really go into our Easter celebrations with a lot of depth and content. And I feel I want to say this carefully. I heard a pastor say this years ago. I love doing this level of depth, Nathan, not because it's egg-headed and academic. It just makes the work of Jesus all the sweeter, all the richer.
Yes.
When we know this, dude. When you analyze a movie, right, and you look for the Easter eggs and you go frame by frame, you appreciate the genius of it more, right? It's first time you're like, cool story. Yeah, it kind of entertained me for 2 hours. I never put my popcorn down. I was so riveted. And then if you can go into, I never even caught that.
Yeah.
How it makes you appreciate it.
Yes.
And you get different things out of different watches. We know that from things like movies.
Yeah.
To really ponder the events,
Yes.
which we've just briefly covered today, of the Exodus, this time of the year at Easter is really faith building.
Yeah.
Because by the time we get to the Gospels and realize, this was all table setting.
Right.
Like, because the Exodus seems, how do you get bigger than the Exodus? You do.
Right.
Much bigger.
Well, and it makes sense why when Christ comes, he is so mad at the religious leaders.
Oh, yeah.
These are the stories that you should know better than anyone. These are the connections that you should have been making all along, that when Christ hits the scene, the welcome wagon should have been opened.
Yes.
This is the one. This is the one all the way back, Genesis 3:15, that God promised to us.
Yep.
And they totally missed it. They totally gloss it over. And so again, it brings to light why he's constantly going after them, because they've taken the truth of God's word and they've twisted it for their own means and their own gains.
Yes. Oh, dude, absolutely. When you said that, it made me go right to John 3 when Jesus talks to Nicodemus,
Yeah.
a Pharisee, an educated, brilliant, biblically informed man. Jesus said, "Are you the teacher of Israel, and yet you do not understand these things? Truly, truly, I say to you, we speak of what we know and bear witness to what we have seen, but you do not receive our testimony.
Yeah.
I have told you earthly things, and you do not believe. How can you believe if I tell you heavenly things?" The whole point is, Nicodemus, you should not be surprised at my saying you must be born again. And maybe we'll save that one too. That ties into what the Old Testament prophets said about the new birth.
Yeah.
And what I love is that they didn't just predict the events, but the effects of the events.
Yeah.
Right? That the events are historical.
Yeah.
The arrest, death, trials of Jesus, the mistreatment of Jesus. Those are the objective, historically narrated events.
Yes.
But they go further than that.
Yes.
And predict how those events work their will on us.
Yes. Well,
It's
so
incredible.
much so, I mean, that what we say is the new covenant is actually found in the book of Jeremiah, right?
Yeah.
We have essentially five covenants that God makes with his people, very distinct promises
Yeah.
that are binding, and one of those is the new covenant that comes in Jeremiah. And so again, it's all the unfolding,
Yeah.
right? And this is why, as screwed up as all those people are, because all people are screwed up,
Yes.
all people are sinners, they're commended for their faith in the book of Hebrews, because look at Abraham and what he had to go on.
Yes.
Right. He had the proto-evangelion, Genesis 3:15. He had the Noahic covenant, that God's not going to destroy the world again. And then he's got the promise that God makes him, and that's all he has to go on. But he believes,
Yes.
okay, God, you've said it. And
believes.
so I'm going to believe that what you have said will come true.
I love it.
And so, and again, it brings full circle. I remember just not too long ago listening, actually it was 2 weeks ago when I was up in Syracuse listening to a sermon on Thomas and doubting, right? Blessed are those who believe and have not seen.
Yes.
And it's so great to look at how everything is just brought together, this unifying theme.
Oh,
And you can't get away from it, and that's exciting.
yeah. I'm excited, dude.
Yeah.
The weeks ahead. I hope it's an encouragement to everyone. We covered a lot of ground today with the Exodus events. And I hope that they will stay with us.
Yes.
As we see how these themes are deepened
Yes.
in their exploration. So maybe that's the last comment. We believe as Christians that the Bible is fully inspired, but that doesn't mean that you can't track the ever expanding,
Yes.
more detailed, progressive nature of revelation.
Yes.
Right, which I always say, Abraham knew things. I think Abraham knew more than Adam,
Yes.
right? But I think David knew more than Abraham.
Yes.
Right? And
Yeah.
I think that Isaiah knew more than David.
Yeah.
Because it was an unfolding.
Yes.
And I think the New Testament confirms this, because we're told that the things we know, the prophets long to understand, and angels themselves are fascinated
Yes.
by these things that we, post-Jesus, post-New Testament era, see.
Yeah.
So it should give us a sense of excitement. What would they have understood at this time?
Yes.
At this time, the Exodus events, God must be serious about keeping his promises, and he made us a nation like he promised.
Yeah.
Which is huge, but it is nothing
Yeah.
compared to what's coming.
Yes.
And what that event prefigures.
Yeah. No, that's great. So on that note, we will end. Greg, till the next time, we just rock the Casper.
Thank you again for listening to These Go to 11, an unchurchy conversation about everyday faith. Once again, please make sure you like, subscribe, and review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you ever find yourself in the Forest Hill, Maryland area, please feel free to stop by at 135 Industry Lane, and you can get all of our service times and information at christfc.org.
These go to 11.